Mr. Ford served until the next presidential election, which was in 1976, when he met a challenger by the name of Jimmy Carter. Carter was an unknown former Democratic governor from Georgia. He barely beat the incumbent president, even though Mr. Ford had not been elected. And I think that if I remember correctly, that worked against him, the fact that he had been appointed by an administration that had basically gone down in flames. So that hurt him more than it helped him. I've read several books about that era to try to figure out what was going on behind the scenes, and actually Gerald Ford was extremely competent and very well liked. But Mr. Carter, in his blue jeans and his southern drawl and his down-home kind of I'm not a politician demeanor, and the use of the television, which was beginning to grow in strength, helped him pull off a win in the election. And a little side note, in November of 1976, Microsoft was registered as a trademark as a result of a letter between Bill Gates and Paul Allen, the two guys that founded it. And don't you wish you'd have bought some stock from those long-haired hippies? So, in 77, the majority of the Vietnam War evaders, approximately 10,000 in number, were pardoned by President Jimmy Carter, and they were allowed to come back home, mostly from Canada. So, understand that your grandma and grandpa are part of a generation that was absolutely dead set on integrity and ethics and doing things right, and they protested with their feet. I mean, they didn't just sit back and take things that the federal government was doing with a grain of salt and say we'll get over it. I mean, they very much pushed back when they thought that things were being done outside the founding fathers' intent for this country. In 1977, Jimmy Carter started the Department of Energy, and okay, so 77, what is that? That's 26 years ago, or is that 36 years ago? They will do the math. And the Department of Energy was founded to 37 to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. 37 years ago. No telling. Somebody, I'm sure, has the number. How much money we've spent, how much time, effort to reduce our dependence on foreign oil. I wonder how that's working out. In 1978, the Camp David peace accords were put together between Egypt and Israel. And by the way, that has stood up pretty well. Egypt has, that's one of the things that area of the globe was most concerned about. The uprisings in Egypt was the loss of that solidarity between them and Israel, because Egypt formed a very good defense mechanism. You know, those two countries were pretty much on, not necessarily on good terms, but they had an understanding with each other, and they didn't cross each other's borders. They didn't go to war with each other. In other words, it was what do we call it with the Russians? Détente. They just agreed, okay, we'll just stop where we are. We're not going to like you, but we're not going to attack you either. And so that was a very comfortable feeling for Israel, and that's one of the reasons all these uprisings in the Middle East, no pun intended, is creating some real shifting sand in terms of the relationships and the stability of the region. Okay? And then we come to 1979. How are we doing on time? We're flying through these things pretty fast.
We're at 20 minutes into the show.
Okay. In March of 79, there was an accident on 3 Mile Island, which was the first nuclear plant. It was in Middletown, Pennsylvania. And it set the nuclear power industry in the United States back quite a bit, and built a reputation. Unfortunately, built a reputation, or allowed folks to build a reputation that it's not a safe fuel to be used for the electric industry, and that's something I know a little bit about. And both nuclear power from the Naval Academy, as well as its application to the electric business. It is by far the safest and the cheapest way to produce electricity. But it's not without its risk. I don't mean that. I just mean that the folks who work in that industry and who run those power plants are unbelievably competent engineers that are unbelievably focused on safety, because they're right there at ground zero. So I think the nuclear patch gets when something does happen, it's not small. That's the problem. When something does happen, it's big, and it's tough to contain. But they work very hard, and on the whole, considering how much actual energy they deliver and how many houses they light or businesses they run, its safety record is better than any other form of generating electricity, right down to the wind turbines. And solar panels are relatively safe, but they're not as reliable. Is the issue. We might at some point in time have a discussion about that. In October of 1979, the Federal Reserve System changed its monetary policy from an interest rate-based approach to a supply target orientation. In other words, the Federal Reserve used to do things in an effort to either increase or decrease the interest that banks were charged, and therefore citizens were charged, and therefore businesses were charged. They made their decisions based on controlling that interest rate up and down and trying to keep it within range. And apparently they decided that didn't work well enough, or whatever reason. There is certainly a school of thought out there that thinks the entire Federal Reserve System is a mistake, but that's not something that I care to take up tonight. So they changed it over to a supply-based environment, which is what we're seeing today, and why you're hearing in the news about all of the billions of dollars that the Federal Reserve is printing, because interest rates are at near zero. They continue to print dollars. So unfortunately, it has the same impact of interest rates going up. It's inflationary, because the more dollars there are, the less that they will buy on an individual basis. The first federal government bailout occurred in 1979 when we as taxpayers agreed to loan Chrysler Corporation $1.5 billion to keep them from going bankrupt. And it worked, and we got 100% of our money back with interest, and much sooner than was expected. So that may have set the precedent for TARP. It may have set, there were a lot of discussions at the time that I recall about it being a slippery slope, and the government should not be in the business of bailing out private enterprises, corporations, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that debate went on in 1979, and it was lost. We did it, and it worked. Well, that made it a whole lot easier to do it the second time when it came to the TARP funds and the bailout of the banks. And in the 70s closed out in 1979 with what was known as the Iran hostage crisis, where 63 Americans were among 90 hostages taken at the American Embassy in Tehran by 3,000 militant student followers of the Ayatollah Khomeini. I've forgotten how long that lasted, but if memory serves me, it was over a year. It was 400 and some odd days.
Yeah, 444 days.
I think you're dead on.
Yeah, 444, I believe. Yeah.
Dave must have been alive.
I was, sure was.
How old were you?
In what,
1979.
79.
Yeah.
I was 18 years old. I was a senior in high school.
So that's why it was making an impact. That's exactly the reason I started out talking about 1963, et cetera. Same time frame. That's when we start to pay attention. That's when most of us start to think of ourselves as adults. Yeah. And so we need to pay attention to adult things. And that Iran hostage crisis was a big, big deal.
Big deal.
It was a big deal. Do you remember the president that just served his final term and got voted out, a fellow by the name of Ahmadinejad?
Yeah.
He was a primary player in that Iran hostage crisis. Yes. And I did the research last night just to confirm. He did not take the hostages. His job was to communicate between the hostages and the Ayatollah. He was handpicked by the Ayatollah. He was a student. I mean, he was in that age group. So he was the primary ute that the Ayatollah went to interface with the hostages and go back and forth between the two. And I read quite a bit about it. There are interesting reports out there on the web as to exactly what role he played. Okay, we should be about 30 minutes in.
27.
That's close enough. Yeah. I'd like to talk to you a little more about what's going on. There's a theory when you get into, if you study business or you study management or you get into an MBA program or whatever, there is a long-standing theory, and it's practiced by every business that's out there today. It was the seminal work. It was originally created by a fellow by the name of Douglas McGregor back in the 60s sometime, I think. Yeah, in the 60s. McGregor was an MIT professor, and he put out there a thing that is known as Theory X and Theory Y. Okay? That all people fall, or all management styles are based on either Theory X or Theory Y. All right? And Theory Y was, he wanted that to be, that was like his pioneering effort in management theory, was to get that out there. Theory X assumes that employees are naturally unmotivated and dislike work, and this encourages an authoritarian style of management. Okay?
Say it again.
Okay. Theory X assumes that employees are naturally unmotivated, lazy, and dislike work, period. This encourages an authoritarian style of management. Okay? According to this view, management must actively intervene to get things done, a.k.a. micromanagement, but with severe penalties. In other words, it's very authoritarian management approach. Okay. People who believe that others lack ambition or desire or not self-motivated or yada yada believe that Theory X is the way you get these people to do what you want them to do. All right? I did not watch it.